Welcome to the Lynx Players Zoom Room. Today, we are here with Tim Lyons. He is the leader of the fellowship at the Clubs of Prestonwood, the Hills course. Tim, how are you, my friend?
I am doing great, Drew. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So for those not familiar, the Zoom Room is just an opportunity we've created to get to know some of our Lynx players from around the region and hopefully just learn a little bit more and hear some of their stories. So for those who aren't familiar, where is the Hills course or the Clubs of Prestonwood?
Our best landmark is Prestonwood Baptist. They've got their own zip code. So if you see this monster church at the corner of Midway and Plano Parkway, you are close. You simply go west on Plano Parkway from Midway. Second Street, you take a right. That's called La Costa, and you end up winding your way all the way back to the clubhouse.
All right. So it's also, it's known as the clubs, plural, of Prestonwood. So you are at the Hills course, but depending on your membership, you can have access to two complete facilities, right?
Yes, there's another one called the Creek. That is at Arapahoe and Preston in North Dallas. And it's really a great club. Two distinctly different courses, two distinctly different communities, and really a great value for the money.
Awesome. All right. Well, so for those who don't know you, why don't you tell us how did you find out about Lynx players or how did your fellowship get started?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those great divine providence stories. I was walking up to a tee box. I made a single time and joined a threesome. And this is about 2 years ago. And that threesome was comprised of Bruce Decker, Nick Legamora, Conrad Peterson. And by about the fourth, they said, hey, we became familiar with this organization called Lynx Players, and we're thinking about starting one here at Prestonwood Hills. And they explained it a little bit. I went home that night, I looked it up and reached out, said, count me in. Been playing golf with those guys ever since. And about 3 weeks after that outing, we began our Lynx Players Fellowship.
That's awesome. All right. And as far as I know, at least of all the fellowships that I'm aware of in Texas, you guys have the earliest start, which is 6:30 a.m. So who made that call?
On Fridays. That this is a very spiritual call. This was like the tablets from Mount Sinai coming down with Moses. 4 to 5 of us play golf at 8 o'clock on Fridays. So 6:30 gives us enough time to have our Lynx Fellowship and get to the range, hit a couple of balls, and walk over to the first tee. So no magic formula. But, it's funny. Once we got to COVID lockdown, we've been very active on Zoom. We've got about 6 to 8 guys that are regulars. And I was on the back patio for last week's, just thinking I'd try something new and different. But a lot of our members, a few of the guys are older and prefer to continue to meet via Zoom while we're still in the height of COVID. So thank goodness that we've got Zoom available to us, because we always start on time and we've had great attendance ever since we have. So it's really been a blessing, because when we're meeting at 6:30 on a Friday, honestly, arrival times are anywhere from 6:20 to 7:45 or 6:45 rather. So we're never quite sure how it's all going to work out.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the word formula. Many fellowships there is no one formula that's successful for Lynx fellowships. It just, depends on the personality. Whatever fits the personality of the fellowship is what's going to work. You guys happen to use the Lynx Friday PDF as the discussion point for your fellowship. So what have you found that makes that successful?
Yeah. You know, Drew, when we first began to work with it, it's so well thought out. Any ministry that's been around as long as Links Players has, and I've really enjoyed learning the history of the organization. It's really well thought out. Why we like it is it gives everyone in the group the opportunity to lead. And there's been a few of our guys who've said, "Oh, I'm not a leader. I can't lead." They're doing a great job because we've got a, a formula, a platform that is the same week in and week out. And I think it gets everybody really comfortable. And the studies that are accompanied by videos are real easy as well. But we've just found that it is so well organized and so well thought out that to do something different, we just felt would be reinventing a wheel that's already in great working order. And again, I'm really excited about how everybody has gotten comfortable leading off of a centralized format. And they never feel like they're ill equipped because the PDF really explains it and lays it out really well.
Well, and something you've mentioned in the past, if you wouldn't mind elaborating as well, is I think you found that it's an effective way to relate golf to scripture and draw guys in that enjoy golf.
Yeah, one of the things that I found so attractive to this ministry was Links Player says changing the conversation at your club, not in lieu of anything else. But I love the fact that, however, this was founded, it was a group of men who love the game of golf who said, how analogous is a life in Christ and God's love for us and our following his will for us through Jesus Christ, analogous to the game of golf. You can love it and still fail miserably. We can love God and still fail miserably, except I'm not sure if golf still loves us, but we know that God still loves us. But I just think the success and failure, yet the persistence to just get better is so aligned with God's plan for us in our lives that once we get to know him, I think many of us, unfortunately, I know I was guilty of it, we interpret our relationship with God in the realm of perfection. If we're not perfect, he won't love us. And the truth of the matter is, he knew we weren't perfect when he sent his son, Jesus Christ, to this earth for us. And Jesus, in his perfection, died on the cross for us. So if we all insisted on perfection in our golf game, how soon would we quit? Yet many of us quit in our relationship with God because we don't feel we're perfect enough. And I just hear God saying to us so strongly, and this ministry does a great job of equating it to golf, stop it. I love you just the way you are. You can be a great golfer and shoot 110, but it's great because you show up, you love the game, you respect the game, and you sincerely want to get better and be a positive influence in the community in which you exist. And I just think this ministry for people who love golf is one that I hope to be able to get a lot more people excited about, because I do think it can change the conversation from the surface, everything's fine, this is about a little gambling, a little Nassau, to no, I'm not doing so well. And I need some help, and I need some prayer, and I need some guidance. And I think the men and women in these fellowships can reach out and help provide that to those who come our way.
Well, so speaking of which, yeah, I'm hurting, I'm not doing so well. And based on your previous answer, I would surmise that you are not on the first step of your faith journey. So if you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about your story.
Yeah. Although I wake up in a cold sweat at times saying, Lord, this far in, I can't believe you still got to be patient with me about X, Y, or Z. I was 27 years old, born and raised Catholic, which I still am today, a Catholic Christian, born again, spirit filled Catholic Christian. And I had an emptiness inside of me that was killing me, drowning me. I was married to a great gal, married at 18 with a baby on the way. I will celebrate 50 years of marriage with that incredible woman on the 10th of October this year. And I was 27, 3 young children, doing reasonably well in my career, and literally had an emptiness that I couldn't put my finger on. So I bought a new car because that was going to be it. A 1979 Ford LTD, black with a silver roof, bucket seats, silver interior. And as I'm coming out of the dealership, absolutely convinced this car would fill the void, I was adjusting to the new brakes. Light turned yellow, hit them a little hard. My briefcase slid off the passenger side. So since the light was red, I put it in park, reached down to get my briefcase, and as I was underneath the dashboard, it hit me like a ton of bricks that this was no different than the car I had just traded in, and that this wasn't it. This wasn't what I was looking for, and that emptiness was 10 times larger in the 5-mile drive home than it was before I bought that new car. So much so that my wife said, "What's the matter?" And I didn't know how to put it in words for her. 3 weeks later, a guy that I'm doing some financial work with invites me to a cursillo, which is Spanish for the word short course, Cursillo de Cristianidad. Long story on how that was founded back in 1940, but it's basically an adult presentation of your faith over 2.5 days. So I showed up for that. Don't know why I said yes. At the time, I didn't know why. I really know why now. And I walked into that chapel on a Thursday night, and you take off your watch. All the clocks are covered up, and all you do is introduce yourself by name. You don't say what you do. You don't know. There's doctors there. There's lawyers there. There's truck drivers. There's ditch diggers and everybody in between, but you don't know that. And I saw a banner hanging in the chapel that said, "May the peace of Christ disturb you." And it did. That stopped me in my tracks, because if there's one thing I knew I didn't have, grew up in an alcoholic household, was one myself at that time, I had no peace. I was in inner rage with a great big black hole. And during the course of that weekend, I heard the parable of the prodigal son, and the priest who was reading it stood in the back of the chapel, and he said, "I want you to hear this from the perspective of the father. You've heard it from every other perspective now. I want you to hear it from his perspective." And when he got to the son's return, he said, "And while the son was still a long way off, the father caught sight of him and ran out to greet him." And then he said, "Gentlemen, do you know why the father caught sight of him? You think it was happenstance? Absolutely not. He caught sight of him because he never, ever stopped looking for him." I had 2 men who were working the retreat had to sit with me as a 27-year-old kid as I wept for an hour and a half uncontrollably. And they just kept saying, "Let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. God's doing something here. Let him work." And from that weekend, which was in October of 1979 at St. Andrew's Parish Hall in Indianapolis, Indiana, my life has been delightfully, wonderfully, adventurously, failing miserably on my part, not been the same at all. And so I'm a long way into this faith journey, and I realize how much longer I have to go. But I do know this, Drew. God used a jackass in the Old Testament to deliver his message, and I'm living proof that he's still using jackasses in New Testament time to deliver his message. Somebody told me that. He said, "You're Balaam's ass." And I
Oh,
said, "Yeah, I can't disagree."
that is awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And hopefully that'll touch someone who ends up watching this video. So thank you again. And then you share a lot of good life stories at the fellowship at Prestonwood. And one story stuck with me a few weeks ago. And it was back when you were working for Hager and you were getting ready to board a plane and rushing out of the office. And I'll just set it up with that. You mind sharing that one?
No, not at all. I was really fortunate to work for the Hager Clothing Company. I worked in a men's store in high school and fell in love with the apparel business. One thing led to another and ended up as the president of the Hager Clothing Company, proving once again that God can do a lot with very little talent. So one day, a gaggle of us, I think there were about 7 or 8, were heading from Dallas to Milwaukee to see our largest customer, Kohl's. We had a wonderful receptionist, Joni Harper, who knew everybody's name and was kind of our brand ambassador. And as all of us blew into the lobby and we were running late for the airport, Joni said, "Tim, I want you to meet this young lady. It's her first day at Hager." And as I slammed on the brakes, I saw all my teammates nervously look at their watches, saying, "Uh-oh, here he goes." And I lovingly looked at them and said, "There's another flight after this one. If I don't make this flight, I'll meet you at the hotel sometime tonight." And proceeded to welcome this young lady who was joining our company. She was of Indian descent. And we sat down on the couch and I asked her where she was going to be working, and just had a delightful conversation. Long story short, I made the flight by the hair of my chinny chin chin, and everybody, all my teammates were making fun of me. "You do this all the time." Well, when I was retiring about 5 years after that incident, this young girl had her father on satellite from India. And he wanted to let me know that that night, after her first day at work, she called her parents in India and said the president of the company told everyone to go to the airport, and he stayed and he spoke with me and welcomed me to the company, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, her father said to me, she told her mother and I that night that she knew she was in the right place. And I want you to know that we did too. The point of that story is if I had a nickel for every time God gives us a prompting to just spend a moment with somebody, just a smile, just a kind word, just 10 seconds, 30 seconds of our time rather than rush. This changed this young lady's life, and I didn't do anything special. I didn't need any special talent. I didn't need anything. All I did was tap into the mentors that I was blessed to have that constantly pounded, make sure you look out and help people along the way experience their journey the same way you did. And that's how I was treated. And I think, Drew, oftentimes, what could be truer than that as disciples? I think if God works it this way, where we see the most magnificent impact we had for the kingdom of God when we finish our time here on earth, we're going to discover that it was no great theological expose or sermon or talk. We're going to discover that it was the time we held a door open for someone, or we said hello to a total stranger and sincerely asked them, "How are you doing today?"
Romans 12:16, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Well done, Tim. Well, obviously you had influence on that young woman's life. And I'm a big fan and a proponent of being aware of the influence we wield, whether we know it or not, and whether we end up finding out how we influence someone or not. But so speaking of influence, and we'll just end with this one, is behind you, you look pretty smart with that background.
Most of those books are unread.
I highly doubt that based on the eloquence with which you've answered each question. But speaking of influence, we're going to improvise here too, as I've got a bookshelf here, so I'm going to let you go first. But if you've got a book, maybe 2 books that have influenced you, one maybe that's not necessarily spiritual and one that is, and just tell us a little bit why.
Yep. One of my favorites of the last 5 years, Simon Sinek, Start With Why. Absolutely incredible book. Start With Why. It really has driven my business philosophy and my consulting practice. He strongly believes that once we know our why, how and what are easier. And everybody's we're experts at saying what and how and why. He makes you work it backwards. Why, how, and what. Really a book that has influenced me greatly. And then John Maxwell, I've been a big fan of his, but the other one that I absolutely love is Golf's Sacred Journey. And it's the follow-up to 7 Days in Utopia by
Dr. David L. Cook.
And it just tremendous. I've probably mailed out 25 copies of that over the last couple of years, both the original and the follow-up. So those are 2 of many that have pounded me over the head. How about you?
Well, this is going to be pretty funny. So my first one is not necessarily spiritual. It's called Daring Greatly. It's by Dr. Brene Brown. And it's basically talking about the power of vulnerability. And this has been, what does it say? How the courage to be vulnerable transformed the way we live, love, parent, and lead. And this was just very instrumental in helping me in starting a ministry and realizing that just when you open up and be vulnerable, just how the walls come down and others feel comfortable as well. And so that one, not necessarily on the spiritual, it's definitely helped spiritually, but then wait, can you hold up what was the second one that you had?
Golf's Sacred Journey.
Oh, you mean kind of like this one?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So 7 Days in Utopia, this is been supremely influential and basically inspired me to get into ministry. After reading that book, I decided that I was no longer going to be concerned about affluence and was going to focus solely on influence, just based on that book. So how about that? Dr. David L. Cook influencing both of us.
There you go.
And what's been really cool is, so I talk about when you influence people, sometimes you'll never know the influence that you had. And so I feel especially blessed because David L. Cook is a supporter of Lynx players. And I've had the chance to meet him and get to express my gratitude for his writing. So that was pretty cool. Well, Tim, that's all I've got in the Zoom room. You have any closing or parting thoughts?
Just that I really appreciate all that you do. And I would really encourage anybody who's going to see this to just get into the Lynx Players website. It is chock full of great information on how we can effectively and comfortably change the conversation. Go a level deeper with people who really need to discover God's love and forgiveness.
Tim Lyons, thank you for stepping into the Zoom room.
Thanks for having me, Drew. Talk to you soon.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.